Fearless Women is sponsored by the Women's Suffrage Centennial Commission.
Welcome to the 2020 National Book Festival. My name is Colleen Shogan, and I'm the Vice Chair of the Women's Suffrage Centennial Commission. I'm honored to moderate this session entitled The Examined Self, which is part of the festival's Fearless Women programming. We have two remarkable authors with us for this discussion. Before we begin, let me tell you briefly about each of them. Elizabeth Tallent is the author of the memoir Scratched, which we'll be discussing today. She is also the author of the novel Museum Pieces and 4 collections of short stories. Her stories have appeared in publications such as The New Yorker, Esquire, Harper's, Grand Street, the Paris Review, and the Three Penny Review. Her teaching has been honored with Stanford's Phi Beta Kappa Teaching Award and the Northern California chapter of Phi Beta Kappa's Excellence in Teaching Award. In 2009, she received the Stanford University Dean's Award for Distinguished Teaching. She has been a finalist for the 2016 PEN/Faulkner Award. Carmen Maria Machado is the author of the best-selling memoir In the Dream House and the short story collection Her Body and Other Parties. She has been a finalist for the National Book Award and the winner of the Bard Fiction Prize, the Lambda Literary Award for Lesbian Fiction, the Lambda Literary Award for LGBTQ Nonfiction, the Brooklyn Public Library Literature Prize, the Shirley Jackson Award, and the National Book Critics Circle John Leonard Prize. She is the writer in residence at the University of Pennsylvania. Welcome, Carmen and Elizabeth, to the 20th Annual National Book Festival.
Nice to be here. Yeah, thanks for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. So I have interviewed other authors who have written memoirs for the National Book Festival, and I always start out with some variation of this question. Why did you decide to write a memoir, and why did you decide to reveal some of your most personal experiences and thoughts in this format? Carmen, maybe do you want to start us out?
Oh, sure. Yeah. I guess the short answer is I didn't know what else to do. I've sort of described, I feel like on my book tour for this book, which I got kind of in under the wire before COVID, a lot of people were asking me about if it felt cathartic to write this book or if it was necessary for me to write this book. And for me, it felt something closer to passing a kidney stone. Like it was terrible and I had to do it because I had other things I needed to get done and other books I wanted to write. And this felt, it felt like it was in my way and I had to sort of get it out of my body, which I wouldn't call catharsis. I think it's like an entirely different sort of process, but yeah, it certainly wasn't because it was fun.
Elizabeth, can you tell us why you decided to write the book?
I think for me, it was kind of as if this book haunted the narrative or my thinking about perfectionism haunted so much else that I was writing that I began to feel that need to really write it and see where that would go. So I really resisted it because of the questions of disclosure. But then there's a paradox because it seems to me that every sentence a writer writes is sort of helplessly self-disclosing, that we are always sort of like, and Virginia Woolf in Orlando says something like, why do we need biographies of writers? A writer is telling you who she is in every single paragraph. You always know that mind that you're in contact with. So it was kind of trying to just map it onto the page instead of keeping all my thinking about perfectionism inside my head.
Can you talk to us about the titles of your respective books, Scratched and In the Dream House? When I thought about both of your books, I thought of how unique these titles were. But after I had read the books, I understood why you had selected those titles. But perhaps you could talk about why you selected those words and why they were meaningful to you. Elizabeth, to start us out.
Yeah, I liked that it was physical. I wanted to get at the embodied quality of the trauma of and I liked that it was past tense, because it seemed like in the past tense of Scratched, the damage had already been inscribed. And so you could either find ways of living with it and writing with it, or you could yield to it and let it dominate. And that kind of seemed to me it's a lot to make out of a single word title, but it gave me what I needed to go on with the book.
I similarly found my title, the process of arriving at my title, to be kind of an essential part of the project. So when I sold it, it actually had a completely different title. Part of the book is set in Indiana, and the title I come up with was House in Indiana, which was just a placeholder. I never liked it, but it was and the whole sort of structure of the book, each chapter is House in Indiana as blank. So I knew I wanted a title that could sort of serve as both the title for the book and also as this sort of these sort of subtitles that use the different sort of tropes and genres that the book uses to sort of articulate that. So it had a lot of heavy lifting to do, but I knew that the House in Indiana was not going to work. So, and I just ignored the problem for months and years. And then as I was finishing up, my editor and my agent were like, so we really need you to like pick a title. Like, we're beginning the part of the process where you have to know what the title actually is going to be. And I was like, okay, give me like 2 days. I'm going to just like focus all my creative energy on figuring out the title. And I just began to, I knew house had to be part of it. Like, houses are a big part of the book. And so I began to just do things like write down every title I could think of existing art that had the word house in it, like every painting and every movie and every other book. And I wrote down all the house idioms I could think of. And I just began like scrambling words. And it was like this weird exercise I used to do copywriting. So it was sort of similar to that, I feel, and like very pleasurable. And so I came up and I liked Dream House sort of kind of popped out at me, and I ran it past my editor, and they were like, how about In the Dream House? And I was like, okay, that works. But it actually ended up working out really beautifully, because once I started sort of, put that as the title, I realized that the theme of dreams actually came up a lot in the book, and dreaming both as fantasy and as a place where like your body is one place and your mind is another. It actually all kind of worked out. And also a dream house is like this idyllic place. Like, I don't know, like the word ended up doing a lot of sort of weight bearing in this way that I actually found very fruitful to sort of finish the book out. So it actually worked out really well in its own way.
Elizabeth, you write about perfectionism, and you write in the book that perfectionism is a strange affliction, because a lot of people actually view it as a strength. So how did you approach writing about a crippling condition that some people consider a virtue?
I think I directly kind of contested that notion of the description of perfectionism, and sometimes as like it's a description that's acknowledging that the person has these impossibly high standards and they have phenomenal drive to reach these standards and goals. And so it's even supposed to be something that you say in a job interview if you're asked what your biggest flaw is. Mm-hmm. And you say, I'm a perfectionist. And that's supposed to be sort of like, that's a positive attribute. So I tried to contest it directly, because it my definition of perfectionism would be that there is this very abusive internal discourse. And so it's the abusiveness and the relentlessness that I was characterizing and kind of taking it in that direction as an experience of the internal censoriousness, and which is highly inhibiting, and which is an ongoing force, and it's disrupting the tolerance that you need in order to make something. That if you want to make something, it seems to me you need an appetite for flaws and failures, and a willingness to bear with your own shortcomings. It's ruled out by the kind of perfectionism that I'm writing about.
And Carmen, your memoir focuses on an abusive relationship you had with a woman for over several years. I think some people probably misconstrue domestic abuse as a predominantly heterosexual problem. And what do you think the impact will be of In the Dream House? What will it have? What impact will it have on broadening awareness about psychological and domestic abuse amongst non-heterosexual communities?
Well, I suppose that one of the most wonderful and terrible thing about being a writer is that one does not know, I think, what the impact of one's work will be in any real measure. I mean, I feel like you get a small sense of it when you're in the world. But I mean, one of the things that I find so interesting about writing is its ability to reach, across national boundaries and languages and time. Like, I can have a conversation with a writer who died long before I was born, and there's no way that person could possibly have imagined me or know that I would be reading their book and having whatever reaction I'm having to it. And so I don't know. I mean, I hope it's helpful and useful. I feel like I've done the thing that I knew how to do, which was write a book. And beyond that, like, it's sort of hard to say. I mean, I hope it opens, and I think my biggest hope is that it opens a door for sort of other writers who want to write about this or similar topics, because, I'm only writing, like, I'm writing a story of like domestic violence in a queer relationship, but I'm like one person with like one very specific sort of intersection of identities. And there are like lots of other people who've had their own experiences. And I think there's just, I don't know, like a lot of ways to have that conversation. And I just really hope that space feels a little more open for other people. And I also, actually, I don't know. I don't also think something else. That's the end of my thought.
I think a lot of our listeners and readers and viewers, they love to hear about the process of writing from our National Book Festival authors. So can you talk a little bit about each of you about how you approached writing a memoir? Writing a memoir is very different than writing a novel or writing a short story or an interpretive essay. How did you ensure that as a writer, you were telling your stories in a way that you wanted them to be told?
Oh, that's the whole ball game. That is the work that you're doing, is trying to figure out where it feels to you as if it's really close to the way you are seeing it. And but I knew from writing fiction since I was in my 20s that so much of my brain is devoted to my literary inheritance. So it is full of these templates. And one of the templates is that there's a hero's journey, or that it would be, I had the notion that reading about an affliction, reading about a disorder like perfectionism would be really unbearable if there was no arc, if there was no hero's journey. But I didn't feel myself to be heroic. So it was a decision to kind of keep that in mind, that tension between the way that part of my brain thinks it ought to go and the way it honestly feels to me. But see, that didn't feel different to me from writing fiction, because if you're writing a fictional character, you have to do the same work of trying to get to their emotional reality. And it also means discarding a lot of bullshit that you've got in your head, a lot of ways that this story should be told, ways that it has been told. And so there's there's a lot of a lot of those tensions, a lot of that work felt familiar to me from writing stories, from writing fiction.
I found the process for me to be very different than writing fiction. It's so funny. I did an event once with Jennifer Egan, and we got into this really interesting discussion about whether we write fiction to get closer to ourselves or further away from ourselves. And I said, oh, I write it to get closer to myself. And she was like, oh no, I write fiction to get like far, far away from myself, which I thought was really interesting. But even though for me, both fiction and nonfiction is a way of sort of excavating personal material, nonfiction felt, I mean, in a way, it's like I had a hand tied behind my back, because I was, with fiction, if something's not working, I can throw it away. I can start over. I can I'll be like, oh, I'll make this happen, or I'll add a new character, or I'll do this. But like, I don't have that option in a memoir. And also I was writing a book that wasn't just a memoir. It also had criticism and essays and pop culture. There's a lot of like sort of other stuff going on in the book. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, for me, it was actually about like kind of getting out, I call it like the wet baby giraffe, like the wet baby giraffe of the actual events of the relationship kind of fell out of me. And then it sort of had the potential for the rest of the book. And then I began to like do a bunch of research and look up other sources and like read legal papers and then begin kind of building the rest of my sort of argument or the rest of the book. But for me, it felt really different, and it was much harder, I should add. Like, I will write fiction any day. I love writing fiction. It relaxes me. It makes me happy. I'm like, I'm good. I'm so good at this. This is so great. What a great writing day I've had. And with the memoir, I was just a mess. I mean, I was a complete mess from beginning to end. So it was really different for me.
Both of your books have been described by critics and by others as uncomfortable reads because they grapple with difficult subjects, such as affliction or domestic abuse. How does someone who writes a memoir or interpretive essays, as you have, entice the reader to keep going, to forging ahead with you while considering such discomfort? I know there were times when I read both of your books when I said, I enjoy this, but I need to take a break from this book so that I can come back and then fully engage with the subject matter that she's dealing with. So talk a little bit about how you're able as a writer to keep the reader along with you when you're dealing with the subjects that you have dealt with in your books.
Well, I loved what Carmen said earlier about Carmen, tell me if I'm paraphrasing you wrong, but it was like it's kind of part of the pleasure, and part of the pleasure of writing is that you don't have to know what the reader is going to make of it. That I guess I feel a lot of trust that it's going to work for some minds, some readers' minds. It's going to work for, and I have never thought I was writing for everybody. So I guess I feel like I talk to people the way I would talk on the page, or the way I would think. It's kind of transcending the page and trying to go to a mind that could bear with me, that could be interested and could find it compelling. And I'm kind of, when I teach, I advocate against slanting things for an imagined reader who's sort of less than, who's kind of less than that. I think you want to write for the person who can really get every nuance, go with you every twist and turn. That there's optimism in imagining that there's this readerly willingness to bear with you, and you can say the hardest things that you're capable of saying in the most sort of nuanced way. That feels like optimism to me, and trust and good stuff like that.
I love that. And I agree. I mean, I feel like the fastest way to sort of make yourself crazy as a writer is to try to write for everyone, because it's literally impossible. There's no way to do it. You will just turn yourself in circles and then be exhausted and never finish what you're doing. And I knew when I was writing this book, like I knew also that the subject that I was writing was fairly niche. I knew that the material was very grim, and I knew that there was a levity I had to create, like a kind of frothiness to sort of get a little energy into because, if it was just this happened, then this happened, then this happened, this happened, it would be unreadable because it would be so grim and so sad, and you'd be like, why am I reading this terrible thing? But I also feel like even my imagined, like, and this is why you can't imagine your readers, like I wrote it thinking this is a book for queer folks who have been in an abusive relationship or like know somebody who have, and like are sort of looking to find some sort of something to reflect their experience or to like engage with. And even before the book came out, like when there were sort of pre-publication copies in the world, I got emails from people who I never imagined the book would speak to. Like I got emails from people being like, I've never been in an abusive relationship, but like my relationship with my parent is very fraught in ways that I recognized in this book. And I had somebody else say like, I'm not gay, but like I'm a woman. And like, I've just never seen verbal abuse talked about in this way. And I had another person be like, I'm a man and I was with an abusive woman, and I'd never seen an abusive woman portrayed in a memoir before. So like, my book hadn't even come out, and already people were showing me that like the readers that I had maybe even like theoretically kind of envisioned was just like such a tiny percentage of like the people for whom the book meant something. So yeah, so I knew, which is like, okay, you're like, I guess I don't know anything. So yeah, I feel like for me, it was just about like sort of, writing into the unknown, and also trying to think about ways to sort of break up some of the intensity of the book with other things was sort of my process.
Can you tell us a little bit about, both of you, what you're working on these days, and talk to us a little bit about your writing during a pandemic? We're certainly in different circumstances than we were 6 months ago or a year ago. Has the isolation of a pandemic, has it affected your writing? Do you think it's made you more productive, less productive? How has it affected you? And also, you're both teachers. You both work at universities. You both interact with students. And how do you think that will affect you as the fall semester begins in your respective positions?
I would say for writing that it's difficult because you're aware of the context, right? You are aware, and my daughter-in-law is she's been an ICU nurse throughout this, and having inadequate PPE, having one mask that she's supposed to wear from the beginning of her 12-hour shift to the end of her 12-hour shift, and having that awareness, which is just a familial connection, but having also the sense that the context is pretty dire, and so within that, to say that, listen, I'm a mad, insane introvert. I think introverts probably have an edge in adapting to this. And I love being with my wife. I love being with our dogs all the time. And I love being able to read and to write all the time. So there's a there's a bind there between that sort of, I don't know if I can be more articulate about it than that I feel a lot of dismay, consciously, socially, politically, phenomenal anxiety and dismay. And then sort of like, hey, I'm at home. And it's sort of been instructive about how much of a working life in late capitalism is involved with like being away from your home, being apart from your family. And I adore teaching. So, and I love nothing better than a seminar table with people who want to talk about what they've just read. Is like heaven to me. So there's some deprivation in doing it on the screen, but I'll take it, right? I still get to see their faces. I still get to be in conversation with their beautiful minds. They're still out there. They want to talk about what they're reading. They want to talk about what they want to write. And it's just very touching to be in that teaching conversation with them. And it's, if I could say it without sounding woojy, it's, it's a great thing to be able to feel like you can try and nurture something in a time when our story is a story of pandemic and illness and separation within illness, people dying alone. To have the work that you do for a paycheck be about connecting with people, it's just a privilege. It's fortunate.
Yeah, that was beautifully articulated. I mean, I have not been very productive on my personal work. I am a hypochondriac. I am an extrovert. I have been really struggling with being at home 24 hours a day. And to sort of make things worse, a few months ago, I had foot surgery. So I can't even do all the things that I normally do to relieve my stress, like cleaning and cooking. So I've been a real mess for a while now. And I have managed to do sort of paid assignments, which is great. And I mean, I'm also like extremely lucky. Like I have a beautiful home. My wife can work from home. We have a wonderful dog. Like we don't have to put our lives on the line every single day, like an essential worker. And so like, I understand how lucky I am. But it's been difficult to get work done. Just because, it's not a normal time. It's not, my brain is not in a normal place. And also, I actually also haven't been teaching this year because I had coincidentally taken the year off prior to all this. So I don't know what teaching is going to look like when I come back. I'm supposed to go back in the spring, and I'm sort of assuming we'll still be online. I'm assuming it's not going to be over for a while. So I'm just sort of preparing myself. But even though I do kind of hate online stuff, I hate Zoom, I hate video chat, I find it very stressful. And I also love like a seminar room full of undergrads, like just talking and being really excited. But I also recognize that like, if that's the way we got to do it to keep everybody safe, like that's what we have to do. And like, we'll figure it out. But yeah, I don't know.
Well, I want to thank both Elizabeth and Carmen for such a fascinating discussion about women's lives, about writing, about the challenges of teaching and instruction during this very difficult time. So thank you very much for joining us for the 2020 National Book Festival, the 20th National Book Festival. And thank you for all of our viewers and listeners who have joined us for this program.